Montana is one of the biggest states in America when it comes to land. It's the fourth largest state behind Alaska, Texas, and California. Montana is even larger than Germany in terms of area, but it has much fewer people. As of 2023, the entire state has only about 1.1 million people, while Germany has 84.5 million people. To put it in perspective, Montana has fewer people than the state of New Hampshire, which is much smaller in terms of land area. Montana's population density is only about 2.9 people per square kilometer, making it one of the most sparsely populated places in the world. There are no big cities or towns in Montana. Among the top 5 largest settlements in the state, only Billings has a population of over 100,000 people, with just 117,000 people as of 2023. The surrounding US states, like North Dakota and South Dakota, are also sparsely populated. North Dakota, for example, has about 4.4 people per square kilometer on average, and the largest city, Fargo, barely surpasses the 100,000 population mark. South Dakota is similarly sparsely populated, with the largest city, Sioux Falls, having about 202,000 residents. Wyoming, to the south of Montana, is America's emptier state and has only 581,000 residents as of 2023. The largest town in Wyoming, Cheyenne, has just 65,000 people, which is not even considered a proper city. The region consisting of Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and parts of Nebraska and Idaho is the most sparsely populated part of the continental United States. Despite its large geographic size, the combined population of North and South Dakota equals that of Manhattan, a much smaller area. Even when adding Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Idaho together, their population is still less than that of Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island combined, not even considering the population of the Bronx. New York City alone has a larger population than all these geographically large states combined, with over 1 million people to spare. Strangely, just across the border in Canada, where you might expect harsher weather and smaller populations, Alberta is much more densely populated with nearly 4.7 million people. Alberta also boasts larger cities like Calgary and Edmonton, each with a population of over 1 million people, despite being located further north than the empty region in the United States. Winnipeg in Manitoba, Canada, also has a population of about 840,000 people. Cities in Canada, particularly in Alberta, are much larger than those in the American states further south, like Montana, the Dakotas, and Wyoming. This may seem surprising, but there are complex reasons for this. The American states of Montana, the Dakotas, and Wyoming, along with parts of Idaho and Nebraska, are among the least populated regions in the lower 48 states. This area is mainly located west of the 98th meridian, an imaginary line that divides the wetter eastern part of North America from the drier western part. East of this line in the United States, there is more natural rainfall for farming, and this has allowed larger populations to develop. Near this line, you can find a string of frontier cities before the environment becomes arid. These cities include San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Wichita, Omaha, Sioux Falls, and Fargo. Further north in Canada, cities like Winnipeg also benefit from this wetter environment. West of the 98th meridian, the land becomes drier and the population is sparser. This is due to several geographical and climatic factors. The vast mountain ranges in the western United States, like the Cascades, Rockies, and Sierra Nevada, limit the areas with enough moisture to support agriculture and larger populations. The western parts of states like Washington and Oregon, exposed to moisture-laden winds from the Pacific Ocean, receive more rainfall, while the eastern parts are drier. In the eastern half of the United States, moisture-rich winds from the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean provide more rain, but this moisture typically doesn't reach far beyond the 98th meridian. This leaves a dry area between the 98th meridian and the western mountain ranges, which is less suitable for agriculture without extensive irrigation practices. Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, along with parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, fall into this dry range. Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming also have the added challenge of the Rocky Mountains, making it difficult to develop large cities. In contrast, the Canadian prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba receive more consistent moisture, allowing for larger and more densely populated cities. This complex interplay of geography and climate has led to the different settlement patterns in this region of North America. The area in these states is vast and mostly flat, which means that the dry winds blowing through here don't encounter much resistance. This makes it one of the windiest places on the planet. So the environments in this part of the United States are dry, tough, cold, and very windy. There hasn't been a lot of resource wealth discovered or utilized in these American states, except for North Dakota, which found and used a lot of shale oil in recent years, especially since the 2010s. This is why historically, these states weren't as developed as other, more suitable places for settlements in the United States. That's also why they have remained sparsely populated. But just across the border in Canada, there are different factors that have led to a more densely populated region compared to Montana and the Dakotas. When European colonists first settled in what's now Canada, they encountered unique geographic features that determined where they could live. One of the most crucial features was the Canadian Shield, which covers nearly half of Canada. It's a massive area with exposed Precambrian rock, the largest of its kind on Earth. The Canadian Shield used to be covered by massive glaciers that slowly moved south over millions of years, scraping away the topsoil and minerals and pushing them to the south and southwest. As a result, the land on the shield is mostly jagged bedrock with only a very thin layer of topsoil, making large-scale agriculture difficult. The landscape is full of lakes and rivers, and building infrastructure on it is costly because most things have to be drilled and blasted into the rock. While the Canadian Shield has valuable mineral resources, it's challenging to build and sustain settlements on it. The largest settlement on the Shield today is the mining town of Sudbury in Ontario, and even it has a relatively small population. Canada has a big area called the Canadian Shield that has lots of rocks and not much soil, so people couldn't settle there. When European settlers came to Canada, they settled near the St. Lawrence River because it was a good place for ships from the Atlantic Ocean to reach. Montreal was a major city in the region because it connected to the ocean through the river. It was Canada's largest city for a long time. The St. Lawrence Seaway project in 1959 helped connect the Great Lakes to the ocean, making cities like Toronto and Chicago more maritime. The area around the St. Lawrence River was good for farming and had moderating influences like the Great Lakes. This made it better for settlement compared to the colder and drier areas to the west. In Western Canada, things were different. The Canadian Shield and the mountains made it harder to build settlements. But there was a special place called the Aspen Parkland with incredibly fertile soil. The soil was so good that it attracted European settlers who came to farm and build a life there. They encouraged people from places like Ukraine and Poland to come and settle in Canada because the soil and climate were similar. This led to a big wave of migration to Canada. Alberta, in particular, became known for its oil. The discovery of huge oil fields led to an oil boom, and this brought a lot of jobs and people to the province. Alberta became one of the wealthiest and most developed parts of Canada. The oil industry also benefited from its location near the United States. In the end, the areas in Canada with good soil, like the Aspen Parkland, attracted settlers, while the Canadian Shield and mountainous regions in the west were harder to settle. The discovery of oil in Alberta transformed it into a prosperous region, making it one of the most densely populated areas in Canada.